The sound of the tattoo machine suddenly died, plunging my studio into silence as the power went out. Perfect timing. My client, a burly man with sleeves of nautical tattoos, lay shirtless on my table, the outline of an anchor half finished on his chest. Outside, rain hammered against the windows of my newly opened shop in Hialeah, with the fury of someone demanding to be let in. "Sorry about this," I said, setting down my tattoo gun. "And the electrical in this building is ancient. I struck a match, lighting the emergency candles I kept for exactly this reason. The flame caught, casting long shadows across the brick walls covered in my flash designs. In the flickering light, the incomplete tattoo on my client's chest seemed to move with his breathing. "And no worries, Tessa," he replied, surprisingly calm. "At least the power didn't cut while you were doing the shading." I nodded, but my mind was elsewhere. 3 months in Hialeah. 3 months since I'd fled my parents' suffocating expectations back in Boston. 3 months of freedom from their constant parade of suitable men they'd selected for me to marry. Men with good careers, good families, and absolutely zero chemistry with their lesbian daughter. The rain intensified, droplets racing down the windows like tears. I inhaled deeply, catching the familiar scent of antiseptic, ink, and the faint trace of lavender oil I used to calm nervous clients. "But mind if I ask what brought you to Florida?" My client's question yanked me from my thoughts. "Escaping an arranged marriage," I replied before thinking better of it. His eyebrows shot up in surprise, and I laughed. I'm not kidding. My parents had the perfect son-in-law picked out. Investment banker. Harvard grad. Male. He said, understanding dawning. "Not your type." "Not even in the same universe as my type." Wind rattled the shop's door, and my phone buzzed with a weather alert. Tropical storm warning. Great. Just what my fledgling business needed. "When should continue this another day?" I suggested, glancing at the darkening sky outside. After rescheduling and seeing my client out, I locked up, feeling the cool metal of the key against my fingertips. The shop was mine, Tessa Hughes, tattoo artist, finally living on her own terms. So why did loneliness still cling to me like a second skin? I pulled out my phone, tapping the fitness app I'd downloaded last week. 30-day strength challenge at Clark's gym, the notification reminded me. I'd signed up on impulse, hoping physical exhaustion might quiet my restless thoughts. The candlelight reflected off the screen, illuminating the profile picture of the instructor, Morgan Clark, owner and head trainer. Dark hair pulled back, intense eyes, slight smile. Something about her seemed familiar, though we'd never met. The power flickered back on, my tattoo machine briefly humming to life before settling into silence again. I took it as a sign and grabbed my gym bag. As I stepped into the storm, rain instantly soaking through my thin jacket, I had no way of knowing that tomorrow's fitness challenge would be the beginning of something that would change everything. No way of predicting that the woman who would soon lie beneath my needle would also find her way beneath my skin, or that our solution to escape the past would become the very thing that would bind us to the future. I never expected to find her at Clark's gym the next morning, the woman who would change everything. The fitness challenge had drawn about 30 people, all of us circled around the instructor in the center of the room. That's when I saw her. Morgan Clark stood with perfect posture, her brunette hair pulled into a sleek ponytail, demonstrating a complex sequence of movements. She wore fitted black leggings and a gray tank top that revealed toned shoulders and a small tattoo peeking out from her collarbone. My fingers itched with professional curiosity about that ink. "Form is everything," she called out, her voice commanding the room. "So if you're just going through motions, you're wasting your time?" When those deep brown eyes swept across the room and briefly locked with mine, I felt a strange fluttering beneath my ribs. I blamed it on pre-workout jitters. The challenge was brutal. Hit circuits that left even the fittest participants gasping. By the halfway mark, sweat plastered my blonde hair to my forehead, and my muscles protested every movement. I considered sneaking out early when I caught Morgan watching me, an appraising look on her face. "Push through," she said, suddenly beside me. "For form is better than most." Her hand briefly touched my shoulder to adjust my position, and I caught the scent of something citrusy mingled with sweat. The contact lasted only seconds, but it sent warmth radiating through my already overheated body. After class, I was gathering my things when she approached. "You're new here." "Not a question." "Started yesterday," I replied, extending my hand. "I'm Tessa Hughes." said Morgan Clark. Her grip was firm. Since you have interesting hands. I glanced down at my fingers, adorned with small tattoos representing various techniques I'd mastered. And occupational markers, I explained. I'm a tattoo artist. Just opened my shop a few blocks from here. Something sparked in her eyes. Ink and needle? That's mine. How'd you know? And I've been looking for the right artist. She pulled down the neckline of her tank top slightly, revealing the tattoo I'd glimpsed earlier, a small, poorly executed compass. I need this covered. It was a mistake from college. And I specialize in cover-ups. I grabbed my phone, trying to appear professional despite my racing pulse. And here's my card. Stop by whenever. I didn't expect her to show up at my shop just 3 hours later. The bell jangled as she entered, now dressed in jeans and a loose blouse, hair down around her shoulders in gentle waves. She looked softer somehow, less intimidating than the fitness instructor who'd commanded the room. And I had a cancellation, I lied, having deliberately kept my afternoon open to recover from the workout. Her eyes wandered over my flash designs, intricate mandalas, watercolor flowers, and geometric patterns. Teas are beautiful, she said, fingers hovering just above a delicate floral piece. Thanks. What are you thinking for your cover-up? She touched the compass tattoo through her shirt, something that represents new directions. I'm at a crossroads in my life. Aren't we all? I replied, gesturing for her to sit in the consultation chair. As I sketched potential designs, she watched my hands move across the paper. The silence between us felt strangely comfortable. You're not from Hialeah, she said finally. Boston. You? And born and raised here, but I spent 4 years in New York for college. A shadow crossed her face. Came back when my father got sick. Family business needed help. I nodded, focusing on the sketch to avoid staring at her. Up close, I could see flecks of amber in her brown eyes, smell the faint lingering citrus scent that clung to her skin. What brought you to Hialeah? She asked. I hesitated, pencil poised above paper. Freedom, I answered simply. Her smile was soft, understanding. Freedom is worth chasing. As she leaned forward to examine my sketches, her hair brushed against my forearm, sending a jolt through my body that had nothing to do with art and everything to do with attraction. I realized with startling clarity that I was in trouble. I had no idea that the woman sitting across from me was running from the same thing I was, or that within weeks we'd both be wearing rings on our fingers, pretending to be something we weren't. Until pretending became the most honest thing we'd ever done. This is insane. Morgan's fingers trembled slightly as she reached for her wine glass, the ruby liquid catching the dim light of the Italian restaurant we'd chosen for our planning session. People don't just get married to escape family pressure. People do it for green cards all the time, I countered, taking a sip of my own wine. This is basically the same concept. 2 weeks had passed since Morgan's confession during her first tattoo session. As I'd worked the needle over her skin, transforming the crude compass into a beautiful watercolor bird taking flight, she told me everything. The family business her parents expected her to run, the merger they were planning through her marriage to their business partner's son, the suffocating timeline that gave her until summer's end to comply. And my parents are traditionalists, she'd explained through gritted teeth as the needle buzzed against her skin. And think at 29, I'm dangerously close to spinsterhood. Now, sitting across from her at a corner table, I watched her absently touch the healing tattoo beneath her blouse. The restaurant smelled of garlic and basil, the murmur of other diners creating a cocoon of privacy around us. Here's how I see it, I said, pulling a napkin toward me and sketching a quick timeline. We get married at the courthouse. You tell your parents it's real. They're upset but can't force you to marry someone else because you're already married. Problem solved. Morgan rubbed her temples, her brunette hair falling forward to frame her face. And after? When do we divorce? Whenever the pressure's off. 6 months, a year, we'll draw up an agreement. I pushed the napkin toward her, our fingers brushing briefly. That same electric current I'd felt during our first meeting shot through me again. And you do this for me? Her brown eyes studied me skeptically. And we barely know each other. I shrugged, trying to seem nonchalant while my heart hammered. Consider it my good deed for the year. The truth was more complicated. I liked Morgan, her determination during workouts, her quiet strength during tattoo sessions, the way she listened intently when I spoke. But I wasn't about to admit that my offer stemmed from anything more than altruism. "Then my parents will insist on meeting you," she warned, taking another long sip of wine. "I can handle parents," I replied, thinking of my own back in Boston. "I'm very charming when I want to be." Morgan's laugh was soft but genuine. "But I believe." Meeting her parents proved more challenging than I'd anticipated. Their sprawling Mediterranean-style home in the affluent part of Hialeah spoke of old money and traditional values. Morgan's father, a silver-haired man with shrewd eyes, shook my hand with barely concealed disapproval. Her mother, elegantly dressed with the same thick brunette hair as Morgan, assessed me like I was a potential business acquisition, rather than her daughter's a roommate. "So you're an artist?" her father said over dinner, somehow making it sound like I'd chosen a career in crime. "The tattoo artist," I corrected, smiling. "Aintini own my own studio." "How?" "Entrepreneurial," her mother replied, the word dripping with condescension. Throughout dinner, Morgan grew increasingly tense, her knuckles whitening around her fork as her parents mentioned how their business partner's son had recently broken up with his girlfriend and was eager to meet Morgan for lunch. Later that night, we escaped to the rooftop patio of their guest house where I was staying. The autumn air carried the scent of nearby orange blossoms as we sat side by side on a wrought iron bench, a bottle of stolen wine between us. "I can't do this anymore," Morgan whispered, looking up at the stars. 29 years of being told who to be, who to love. "Then don't," I said simply. She turned to me, her face half-shadowed in the moonlight. "Oh, let's do it. Let's get married." My heart stuttered despite knowing this was just an arrangement. "Are you sure?" Instead of answering, she leaned forward impulsively, her lips meeting mine in a kiss that tasted of wine and desperation and something else I couldn't name. My body responded before my brain could catch up, my hand sliding into her hair, pulling her closer. When we broke apart, both breathing heavily, Morgan looked as startled as I felt. "I'm sorry," she whispered, though she didn't move away. "Don't be." In that moment, with the stars above and the scent of orange blossoms around us, I realized our fake marriage plan had just become infinitely more complicated. Because that kiss, that impulsive wine-flavored moment, had felt more real than anything I'd experienced in years, and that terrified me more than meeting her parents ever could. The morning after our kiss, Morgan and I silently agreed to pretend it hadn't happened. We focused instead on the logistics of our arrangement, exchanging texts about courthouse appointments and what documents we needed. Yet every time my phone buzzed with her name, my heart did that annoying flutter thing I couldn't seem to control. A week later, disaster walked through my shop door in skin-tight jeans and a leather jacket. Surprise, baby. I was in the neighborhood. Adriana Robinson, my ex from Boston, stood in my tattoo studio, her red lipstick perfect as always, her presence like a tornado in my carefully ordered life. My current client, a college kid getting his first tattoo, looked between us with undisguised interest. "Give me 5 minutes," I told him, then dragged Adriana into my back office. "What are you doing here?" I hissed, closing the door. She leaned against my desk, crossing her arms. "Your mom told me where to find you, said you were going through some phase down here in Florida." "It's not a phase, it's my life." I ran a hand through my hair, frustrated. "I can't just show up unannounced." "And I missed you." Her voice softened as she stepped closer, her familiar perfume, vanilla and sandalwood, washing over me. "In Boston isn't the same without you." I stepped back, putting distance between us. "We broke up for a reason, Adriana." "But we broke up because you weren't ready to come out to your parents," she corrected. "But now you have. We can start fresh." Before I could respond, the bell above my shop door chimed. Through the office window, I saw Morgan enter, her gaze immediately finding me, then sliding to Adriana, who had stepped close enough that her hand now rested on my arm. Morgan's expression shuddered, becoming the polite mask I'd seen her wear around her parents. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "I can come back." "No," I said too quickly, moving away from Adriana. "So Morgan, this is Adriana, an old friend from Boston. Adriana, this is Morgan, my..." A stumbled over the word. Fiancé, Morgan finished smoothly, walking forward to extend her hand. The shock on Adriana's face would have been comical under different circumstances. Fiancé? She repeated, looking between us. Since when do you believe in marriage? And people change, I replied, avoiding Morgan's gaze. Adriana left shortly after, promising we'd talk later. Her eyes conveying a conversation was far from over. The tension in the shop was palpable once she departed. So that's the ex, Morgan said quietly, perching on the edge of my client chair. How did you... And the way she looked at you. The way you looked uncomfortable. Morgan shrugged. Unfamiliar with unwanted attention from exes. A strange, possessive feeling surged through me at the thought of someone pursuing Morgan. I pushed it aside, focusing on the reason she'd come by. But my parents issued an ultimatum, she said, anxiety tightening her features. Either I attend dinner with Richard, their business partner's son, or they'll cut me off financially. Would that be so bad? I asked gently. It's not just money, it's the gym. Her voice wavered. When a property belongs to them, if they pull support, I lose everything I've built. I reached for her hand without thinking. When's this dinner supposed to happen? Friday night. They're insisting I go alone. I squeezed her fingers. Then we accelerate our timeline. Get married before Friday. She looked up sharply. That's in 3 days. Better hurry then. Later that day, Morgan joined me at the gym for her regular workout session. Watching her demonstrate proper form for deadlifts, her body moving with practiced precision, I felt that now familiar tug of attraction. Your turn, she said, gesturing me forward. So remember to engage your core. As I positioned myself in front of the weights, she moved behind me, her hands light on my hips. Lower, she murmured, her breath warm against my ear as she guided me into proper form. My body responded immediately, a rush of heat flooding through me that had nothing to do with exercise. When her hand slid up to adjust my shoulders, fingers brushing against the bare skin of my arms, I nearly dropped the weights. "When you okay?" she asked, stepping back. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Later, in the locker room, the tension between us was unbearable. Most other gym-goers had left, leaving us alone amid the steam from the showers and the scent of various body washes. Morgan sat beside me on the bench, her hair damp, skin flushed from her shower. "Are we making a mistake?" she asked quietly. "Probably," I admitted, looking at her, "but I still want to do it." She leaned forward then, her wet hair brushing my cheek as her lips found mine. Unlike our first kiss, impulsive and wine-fueled, this one was deliberate, searching. Her hands cradled my face as mine found her waist, pulling her closer on the narrow bench. What began as a gentle exploration quickly deepened into something more urgent. Her fingers tangled in my hair as mine slipped beneath the hem of her shirt, finding warm skin. The locker room faded away, nothing existing beyond the sensation of her mouth on mine, her body pressed against me. When we finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, the realization of what just happened, what was happening between us, hung in the air like a physical presence. Our fake marriage suddenly felt like the most complicated thing I'd ever agreed to. Thursday morning arrived with a storm that matched my nerves. Rain slashed against the windows of Hialeah's County Courthouse as Morgan and I sat side by side on a hard wooden bench, waiting for our number to be called. "So you sure about this?" I asked for the third time, watching her twist the simple silver band she'd purchased yesterday. My own matching ring felt foreign on my finger, a weight I wasn't accustomed to. "Unsure," she replied, though her voice trembled slightly. She wore a cream-colored dress that made her olive skin glow, her brunette hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders. She'd never looked more beautiful, or more nervous. "Clark and Hughes?" a clerk called from the doorway. We stood in unison, following her into a small room where a judge waited, looking bored behind a stack of paperwork. The ceremony itself was almost comically brief, a recitation of legal statements, a perfunctory may kiss that we fulfilled with a chaste peck, and signatures on official documents. Our witnesses were strangers, a courthouse security guard and the clerk who'd called our names. "That's it?" Morgan whispered as we exited the building, marriage certificate in hand. "We're actually married?" "Till divorce do us part," I quipped, though the joke fell flat even to my own ears. Something about seeing her name linked with mine on official government documents made this charade feel suddenly, uncomfortably real. The rain had intensified, forcing us to make a dash for my car. By the time we slammed the doors shut, we were both soaked, Morgan's carefully styled hair now plastered to her face, my own blonde strands dripping onto the leather seats. My mother would die if she saw me getting married like this. Morgan laughed, an edge of hysteria in her voice as she gestured to her now drenched dress. My mother would die if she saw me getting married to a woman, I countered, which made her laugh harder. The tension broken, we drove back to my apartment above the tattoo shop, where I'd laid out a modest reception of champagne and takeout from our favorite Thai place. Thunder rumbled overhead as we kicked off our shoes, the storm outside a dramatic backdrop to our unconventional celebration. To the most practical marriage in history, I toasted, raising my glass. And to freedom, Morgan countered, clinking her flute against mine. As the champagne warmed my blood and the storm raged outside, our celebration gradually relaxed from awkward to comfortable. Morgan curled up on my couch, her legs tucked beneath her as she told stories of terrible dates her parents had set up over the years. I countered with tales of my own family's matchmaking disasters. The last guy they tried to set me up with actually asked if my lesbian phase was because I hadn't found the right man. I groaned, pouring us each another glass. "What did you tell him?" Morgan asked, her eyes bright with amusement. "Said he definitely wasn't the right man," I replied, making her laugh. Outside, lightning flashed, illuminating her face in brief electric bursts. In those flashes, I caught something in her expression, a softness, a vulnerability that made my heart stutter. When the power suddenly cut out, plunging us into darkness, neither of us moved to find candles. In the strange intimacy of the blackout, with rain pounding against the windows and thunder shaking the building's old bones, Morgan set down her glass and moved closer to me on the couch. "Thank you," she whispered, her face just inches from mine, barely visible in the darkness. "For helping me." "Any time," I managed, suddenly aware of how close she was, of the scent of champagne on her breath mingling with her citrus perfume. Then she was kissing me, not the chaste peck from the courthouse, or even the exploratory kisses we'd shared before. This was something else entirely, urgent and hungry. My hands found her waist as hers tangled in my hair, pulling me closer. The champagne glass tumbled forgotten to the carpet as she pressed me back against the couch cushions. When we broke apart, both breathing heavily, thunder crashed directly overhead, as if the sky itself was responding to whatever was happening between us. "Tis complicates things," I whispered against her lips. "Everything about us is complicated," she replied before kissing me again. Later, as Morgan slept beside me in my bed, our marriage bed now, I supposed, I stared at the ceiling and wondered how we'd ended up here. What had started as a business arrangement to help her escape an unwanted marriage had become... what exactly? The silver band glinted on my finger in the dim light from the street lamps outside, a promise neither of us had meant to make. 2 weeks into our marriage, and Morgan had fully moved into my apartment above the tattoo shop. Her fancy clothes now hung beside my band t-shirts in the cramped closet. Her expensive shampoo occupied the shower ledge next to my bargain brand. The domestic routine we'd fallen into felt strangely natural. Morning coffee together before she headed to the gym, and I opened the shop, take-out dinner shared on the couch most evenings. It was during one such evening when the bell above my shop door jingled, despite the closed sign clearly displayed. "Sorry, we're..." The words died in my throat as an unfamiliar woman with striking green eyes and a sleeve of professional tattoos stepped inside. "Are you Tessa Hughes?" she asked, her voice carrying a slight southern accent. I am..." She smiled, extending her hand. "Olivia James. I'm new to town and heard you're the artist to see." Something about her smile, too practiced, too perfect, put me on edge. Still, business was business. "What kind of work are you looking for?" I asked, gesturing for her to follow me to the consultation area. "A full back piece," she replied, settling into the chair across from me. "Something special. I'm willing to pay premium rates for multiple sessions." As she described her vision, an elaborate phoenix design that would require at least 6 sessions, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was watching me too closely, her questions becoming increasingly personal. "Do you live above the shop?" she asked casually, glancing toward the ceiling. "Sometimes," I replied vaguely. What shade of red were you thinking for the phoenix's plumage? By the session's end, we'd scheduled her first appointment for the following week. As she left, her hand lingered on mine a beat too long. "Looking forward to spending more time with you, Tessa," she said, her green eyes holding mine. When Morgan returned from an evening workout class, I recounted the strange consultation. She kept asking personal questions, I explained as we prepared dinner in our tiny kitchen. Pin where I lived if I was single. It was weird. Morgan's knife paused over the tomato she was slicing. What did she look like? Tall, reddish-brown hair, green eyes. The knife came down with more force than necessary, splitting the tomato in half. Did she say her name? Olivia James. Why? Morgan set the knife down carefully. That's Richard's sister. Frischard, as in, and a man my parents want me to marry. His sister's a private investigator. The implication hung in the air between us. They were checking up on me, on us. 3 days later, Morgan's fears were confirmed when her parents requested our presence for Sunday dinner. Her mother's tone on the phone left no room for refusal. The meal was excruciating. Mrs. Clark's smile never reached her eyes as she interrogated me about my business, my family, my education. Mr. Clark barely spoke, observing me with thinly veiled disapproval. When dessert was served, a beautiful tiramisu that tasted like cardboard in my anxious mouth, he finally broke his silence. Interesting timing, he said, setting down his fork. Your marriage, coming just before the meeting with Richard. Then there was no meeting to be had, Morgan replied, her voice steady despite the tension radiating from her. I'm married now. Yes, about that. Mrs. Clark's smile turned predatory. But we were concerned about this sudden union, so we had someone look into it. She slid a manila folder across the table. Inside were photos, Morgan and me entering the courthouse, the rushed ceremony with strangers as witnesses, our exit minutes later. This doesn't look like a love match, Mr. Clark said coldly. It looks like a business arrangement. And our marriage is none of your business, I interjected, my hand finding Morgan's under the table. And it becomes our business when you marry our daughter to help her avoid her responsibilities, Mrs. Clark snapped. And we know about your history, Miss Hughes. Running from an arranged match in Boston, only to help our daughter do the same here. My blood ran cold. They'd done their research thoroughly. The drive home was silent, tension crackling between us like static electricity. When we reached the apartment, Morgan exploded. When they had you investigated, she paced our small living room. They're treating this like a hostile takeover, not their daughter's life. Morgan, and now they know. They know this isn't real. Her voice cracked. They'll never stop pushing now. Is that what this is to you? I asked quietly. Not real? She stopped pacing, looking at me with confusion. 'Cause it feels pretty damn real to me, I continued, my heart racing, and sharing a home, a bed. That's not what we agreed to, she interrupted. When said this was temporary. An arrangement. The words stung more than they should have. Right, an arrangement. Tessa, I didn't mean... No, you're right. I grabbed my jacket. This is just business. You got what you needed. Freedom from Richard. I trailed off, unsure what to say. What had I gotten, except more complicated feelings for a woman who saw our relationship as a transaction? Where are you going? She asked as I headed for the door. Out. I need air. I slammed the door behind me, taking the stairs 2 at a time. The night air hit me like a slap, cool against my heated face. I walked aimlessly through Hialeah's streets, past closed shops and quiet homes, wondering how I'd managed to fall for my own charade. 3 days passed with Morgan and me dancing around each other in the apartment. We were polite strangers sharing a space, our previous intimacy replaced by careful distance. Each night, I slept on the couch while she took the bed, both of us pretending this arrangement wasn't killing us slowly. In the tattoo shop, I channeled my emotions into art. Between clients, I worked obsessively on a new design, a piece that combined elements of Morgan's existing tattoo with new symbolism, 2 birds in flight, their wings touching, surrounded by watercolor washes that blended from her colors into mine. It was sentimental, obvious, and I couldn't stop myself from creating it. That for anyone special? my regular client asked as I sketched during his break from getting a sleeve filled in. Oh, just an idea, I replied, quickly flipping the page. On the third evening, I returned from a supply run to find the apartment empty. Morgan's gym bag was gone, likely at her evening class. But something felt different. I noticed her laptop open on the coffee table, a document displayed on the screen, a dissolution of marriage. My stomach dropped. She was already preparing divorce papers. I backed away from the computer, grabbing my keys again. I couldn't be here when she returned. I didn't trust myself not to beg her to reconsider, and that would be pathetic given that our marriage was never meant to be real in the first place. Without conscious thought, I found myself driving to the gym, not to confront her, just to see her. The evening rooftop yoga class was underway when I arrived. A dozen people on colorful mats silhouetted against the sunset. I spotted Morgan immediately, her graceful form unmistakable even in profile. I stayed in the stairwell, just watching as she moved through poses with practiced ease. The setting sun bathed everything in golden light, turning her skin to amber and her hair to mahogany. She was breathtaking, and she wasn't mine, had never been mine. As the class ended, participants rolled their mats and began filing toward the stairs. I turned to leave before being discovered, but a voice stopped me. Tessa? I froze, then slowly turned back. Morgan stood at the top of the stairs, her yoga mat tucked under one arm, her expression a mixture of surprise and something I couldn't name. What are you doing here? She asked, coming down a few steps. And words failed me. What could I say? That I'd seen divorce papers on her computer and panicked? That I'd missed her even though we lived in the same tiny apartment? I needed to see you. She descended the remaining stairs until we were face to face. This close, I could see the fine sheen of sweat on her skin, smell the familiar citrus scent that clung to her. I've been trying to figure out what to say to you, she said quietly. For days. I saw the document on your computer, I blurted out. And dissolution papers. Her eyes widened. You weren't supposed to see that yet. It's fine. I forced a smile. That was always the plan, right? Temporary arrangement? No, Tessa, that's not... She stopped, shaking her head in frustration. Can we not do this here? As if on cue, another yoga participant appeared at the top of the stairs. Morgan grabbed my hand, pulling me down to the ground floor and out a side exit into an alley beside the gym. The last rays of sunset painted the brick walls in shades of orange and pink. "Son, I didn't fill out those papers," she said once we were alone. I opened the template, stared at it for an hour, then realized I couldn't do it. You... couldn't? I don't want a divorce, she said softly. And I don't want this to be temporary or fake, or an arrangement. Her voice cracked on the last word. I want it to be real. The world seemed to still around us, the sounds of traffic fading away until all I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. When did you know? I asked, barely trusting my voice. I think I knew that first day in your shop, she admitted. But I convinced myself it was just attraction, that I could handle a fake marriage without complicating it with feelings. She gave a small, sad laugh. I was very wrong. I reached out, my fingers tracing the line of her jaw. And I've been drawing you, I confessed. A new tattoo design. For us? For us, she repeated, leaning into my touch. Then we were kissing, desperately, hungrily, my back against the brick wall of the alley, her hands in my hair. Everything we'd been holding back for days poured out in that kiss. My hand slid under her tank top, feeling the warm skin of her back, pulling her closer until there was no space between us. Take me home, she whispered against my lips. Home. Our tiny apartment above the tattoo shop that had somehow, against all odds, become home to both of us. That night, there was nothing temporary or fake about what happened between us. Every touch, every kiss, every whispered confession in the darkness felt like sealing a promise, one much more binding than the hasty vows we'd exchanged at the courthouse. 1 month into our newly acknowledged real marriage, Morgan's parents summoned us for another Sunday dinner. This time, the invitation came via a formal card rather than a phone call, the kind used for business meetings, not family gatherings. When we don't have to go, I told her, watching her turn the heavy cardstock over in her hands. Yes, we do. she replied with quiet determination. It's time to end this once and for all. The Clark residence seemed more imposing than ever as we pulled into the circular driveway. Morgan gripped my hand tightly as we walked to the front door, her knuckles white with tension. Her mother greeted us with Arctic politeness, leading us to the formal dining room, where her father waited, stone-faced and silent. The table was set for 4, crystal glasses catching the light from the chandelier overhead. "And you look well," Mrs. Clark said to Morgan, pointedly ignoring me. "Own, the gym must be doing well." "It is," Morgan replied. "We're expanding, actually. Adding a wellness studio that combines fitness with Tessa's artistic talents." I nearly choked on my water. This was the first I'd heard of this plan, though we'd discussed possibilities for collaboration. Mr. Clark finally spoke, his voice cutting through the tension. "That won't be possible." "Excuse me?" Morgan asked. "And Jim's lease is up for renewal next month," he continued, setting down his fork with precise movements. "And property owners, we've decided not to renew." The blood drained from Morgan's face. You can't do that." "When we can, and we have," her mother interjected. "Unless, of course, you reconsider this situation." She gestured vaguely between Morgan and me. "And Richard is still amenable to the arrangement we discussed." I felt Morgan trembling beside me and placed my hand over hers on the table, a small gesture of solidarity that didn't escape her parents' notice. "So would destroy your daughter's business because you don't approve of her wife?" I asked, unable to remain silent. "This isn't about approval," Mr. Clark replied coldly. "It's about the future of our family's legacy." Morgan stood suddenly, her chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "No, it's about control. It's always been about control." Her mother's perfect composure slipped slightly, her eyes narrowing. "Morgan, sit down. We're discussing this reasonably, and there's nothing reasonable about threatening my livelihood because I won't marry who you choose," Morgan shot back, her voice steady despite the emotion radiating from her. "So here's my counteroffer. Accept my marriage to Tessa and my life choices, or lose me completely." Her father scoffed. Don't be dramatic." "And not being dramatic, I'm being clear." Morgan's voice rang with newfound authority. "And you pull the gym lease, I'll never speak to either of you again. No holidays, no grandchildren visits, nothing." The room fell silent, the only sound the ticking of the antique clock on the mantel. "So you would choose her over your family?" her mother finally asked, disbelief evident in her voice. Morgan's hand found mine again, "Since she is my family now." We left without finishing dinner, the slam of the front door behind us more satisfying than any dessert could have been. 6 months later, our new sign went up. Synced Wellness, a combined tattoo studio and fitness center in a renovated warehouse space in downtown Hialeah. Morgan's parents had eventually relented on the gym lease, though relations remained strained. Their presence at our grand opening, brief and formal though it was, represented a small step toward acceptance. The business thrived, with Morgan's fitness clients often becoming my tattoo clients and vice versa. Our apartment above the new space was twice the size of our old one, though we still bumped into each other in the bathroom every morning, now intentionally rather than accidentally. On our 1-year anniversary, we closed the studio early. I had prepared for this day for weeks, designing matching tattoos that represented our journey. 2 birds in flight, wings touching, surrounded by watercolor washes that blended our favorite colors together. "So, you go first," Morgan said, settling into my tattoo chair, her eyes bright with anticipation. As she worked the needle over my skin, her hands now steady and skilled after months of my teaching, I reflected on how much had changed in a year. What had begun as an escape plan, a business arrangement between strangers, had become the most authentic relationship of my life. When it was her turn, I tattooed my design onto her skin with careful precision, marking her as I had been marked. As I wiped away the excess ink, revealing the completed piece on her shoulder, she caught my wrist, pulling me down for a kiss. "Happy anniversary," she whispered against my lips. "To many more," I replied. That night, as she slept beside me, her new tattoo protected under a thin bandage, I traced the outline of her face in the moonlight. I thought about the courthouse wedding with strangers as witnesses, the hasty vows we'd exchanged without meaning them, and how sometimes the most genuine promises begin as pretense. We had started with a false marriage certificate and ended with something no document could capture, a connection that had been real long before either of us was brave enough to admit it.